Throughout all time, the nourishment of our ancestors came from the divine combination of sun, air, earth, and water. All food was the natural fruiting of these elements. Today, as we all know, pesticides and herbicides, bug and weed-killing chemicals have entered the food chain. Unfortunately, producers' and consumers' eyes have remained focused on only the short-term profits and expenses of our food system. This video is a brief portrait of organic growers, people who are committed to taking care of their neighbors and to taking care of the planet. It is a tribute to the community of people who work 7 days a week nurturing and protecting the land. They are proving that it is senseless to continue spraying poisonous chemicals onto the food we eat and into the water we drink.
I remember I was to a meeting when atrazine first come out, and it was just a couple miles from here. They had a demonstration. They sprayed with atrazine, and then they had a field day, and why they told us this atrazine is superior. You can drink it. It won't hurt you a bit. But now we're drinking it through our well water against our will. That's the trouble. My advice, if they're using herbicides, is to wean themselves off gradually. I mean, don't just cut it off. We just cut it off when we changed over. We just quit spraying and we went to rotary hoeing and cultivating. But my advice is to wean themselves off gradually. Keep on cutting back, see, every year, and then just gradually cut it out. By using so many chemicals and insecticides, especially, which kills off all your bacteria in the ground, and by using anhydrous ammonia, another bad one. See, they get their ground in such a bad shape, that it gets so solid that it takes a while to change back over. It ain't going to be done in a year or so. I'll tell them that. You gotta work at it, but it can be done. I think the farmer is aware of this, and I think that he's can see that what's happening, and if we destroy our groundwater, if we destroy our land, what's going to be for the future generations?
Unfortunately, many of the foods we consume daily are tainted with invisible poisonous residues. Although most of us don't want to think about it, the simplest meal can become a chemical nightmare. The federal government recently performed its Total Diet Study, an intensive analysis of toxic chemicals in American food. Butter is one of the most frequently eaten foods in the American diet. The Food and Drug Administration's study found 101 residues of pesticides and industrial pollutants in butter samples taken from around the United States. It's important to remember that even if a chemical is toxic enough to be banned in the United States, it's perfectly legal to import these foreign crops into the U.S. that have been treated with banned chemicals. The list of pesticide residues present in our food and water supply is phenomenal. The point is that every time we write out our checks at the local grocery store, it is us as consumers who are voting for and paying for this kind of system. Unfortunately, the costs of industrialized farming don't end at the checkout counter. Although every year thousands of people are afflicted with the agony of cancer from their contact with low levels of chemicals, it is the destructive neurotoxins that are impairing countless people's mental abilities. These neurotoxins have a profound effect on mental clarity, our ability to think, react, and comprehend. Steve O'Reilly runs his organic dairy operation on 700 acres in southeastern Minnesota. When Steve took over the family farm in 1973, it didn't make sense to him to spray poisonous chemicals on food crops in order to kill the unwanted bugs and weeds. He also didn't want to pay out hard-earned money to chemical companies if he didn't need to. Even if many farmers recognize the problems with chemicals, like the contamination of their own family's drinking water, there are a number of barriers they must face. The majority of farmers in Steve's generation have never farmed without using chemicals. Peer pressure from other farmers in the community is a strong consideration. Farm management and extension agents have also looked down on organic farming techniques as going back to the past. Millions of dollars poured into advertising and public relations allow the chemical industry to form public opinion. Undaunted by these kinds of pressures, Steve learned that by rotating crops and by carefully timing his planting and cultivation, he was able to gain the upper hand on weeds and bugs without poisoning them. It's impossible to harvest corn or soybeans year after year from the same plot of land without severely depleting the soil. If you weaken the topsoil, then the crops you grow on it will also be weak and susceptible to infestation. Crop rotation is a requirement to taking care of the land. This means you might grow corn one year, small grains like oats or barley the next, hay after that, and hopefully even be able to let the land lie fallow a year as well. Government subsidies have been encouraging farmers to plant corn or soybeans year after year after year on the same land. It's hard for farmers to resist the lure of these federal subsidies. Huge agribusinesses profit the most from policies which ensure a cheap supply of corn and soybeans. It's a very small portion of the money we spend on food that goes to the actual cost of the grain we eat. Most of our money goes to the agribusinesses who process that grain. Cheap grain makes for a cheapened environment. It is a theft from farmers, and it's a theft from the land. Consumers and taxpayers are, of course, also the ones who foot the bill for these wasteful methods. Only 1% to 2% of all farmers are venturing out on their own, away from industrialized farming practices. Organic farmers need consumer support. Despite the fact that we all would like to buy fresh milk and butter that was produced without using pesticides or herbicides, the resources to process and market organic products are very limited. So the milk from Steve's dairy goes into the same bulk tank as his neighbors who use chemical sprays. When we as individuals ask the managers at our supermarkets for food grown without pesticides and herbicides, then the food industry will get the message.
We have beef, cow, calf operation. We have the geese. And then, of course, from the geese, we get the goslings. And then, like, in July and August, then we put in about 2,500 chickens, baby chicks, and we start our broiler operation, feeding. And then we start dressing chickens at the end of September. And then we dress geese at Thanksgiving and at Christmas. It's quite a diversified operation, actually. When we first started, we were running about 500 acres of land. When you're running a lot of cropland, you can't get around completely, and that is why so many of them use the chemicals, because they can do so much more. Well, if they just look at what they have to wear when they put these chemicals on the fields, and they can look at the cornflakes that they're buying in the store and say, this is going into my system, and if I have to wear an outfit like I'm going to Mars to put it on my crop, what is it going to do in my food? Because all that processing isn't going to take that chemical out. It goes through the stalks. What I cannot understand is the amount of money that is put into these chemicals and the money that they spend for the seed. How can they possibly say that they are making so much money on it? Because the chemicals are very, very costly. They're very costly. And the thing is, they can't do any crop rotation. Even in a dry year, if they sprayed with atrazine, they have to plant corn for 3 years. Some of them, I don't think they've raised anything but corn on the land. And it's hard on the soil. You have to seed alfalfa to get rid of thistles and everything. You got to have the rotation. The thing is, people are going to have to start taking an awareness that the easiest course is not always the best course, and it's going to take some labor in order to produce good, healthy food and crops. I mean, it makes sense because you are what you eat.
No matter what you believe the effects are of toxic residues in the soil or in the food you eat, one thing can't be argued, and that's the fact that our water is being polluted. In the U.S. alone, hundreds of millions of pounds of pesticides and herbicides are sprayed on the land every year. These toxins are not just disappearing. Poisons that we now consider too potent to use in our own country are produced here, then cynically exported to third world countries. More DDT is produced in the United States today than when it was legal to spray it within our own borders. Are third world environments really isolated from our own? We are warned not to eat too many fish from certain lakes and rivers. Chemical companies and industry spokesmen talk about the acceptable risk of toxic chemicals, denoting the political acceptance of however many deaths and cancers allowed for each and every chemical. You only have to go as far as your local hospital or clinic to see the symptoms of our toxic bombardment. Many of us are reaching the threshold of our chemical tolerance. When we suffer through and agonize or mourn a cancer in one of our own loved ones, then that whole notion of acceptable risk takes on a different meaning for us.